The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.
For members of the St. Louis County Council, 2019 has been quite the whirlwind. Few events in county political history have been so seismic as the demise of Steve Stanger's county executive administration. And St. Louis County Councilman Mark Harder has a lot of thoughts on what the county's been through and where it needs to go from here. The Ballwin Republican joins us on the latest edition of Politically Speaking, so let's hit the music.
This is Politically Speaking, the longest-running episodic podcast about Missouri politics.
It's a little complicated in Bolivar because there is a Parsons family there.
But we also knew that it was important to make sure that we got to where we needed to go.
You know, if you walk in a room and you're getting ready to make a decision and everybody in the room looks like you need to stop.
And right now what happens in the United States Senate is as critical as anywhere else in the country.
I really want the state to succeed.
Well, we want everybody to know that we're all working together.
I just worked hard to try to build my name where I didn't have the money.
And welcome to Politically Speaking. I'm your host, Jason Rosenbaum, a political correspondent with St. Louis Public Radio. Joining me in studio today, my co-host,
Julie O'Donohue.
And returning for the first time since February 2018, our special guest today,
Councilman Mark Harder, St. Louis County.
The 7th District, which is West County, basically?
West County, basically west of 141 out to the county line.
A beautiful part of the county. My dad
course.
grew up in that part of the county when it was farmland, as I think I explained on 70 other shows. So it holds a close place in my heart. You know, nothing's changed since February 2018. It seems like everything has been pretty tranquil in county politics.
It's been pretty boring,
Pretty boring.
Yeah.
I think we're being a little sarcastic, Julie, right?
Yeah, we are.
So it's been about, 3 months, 4 months since the Stanger explosion started, and he was subpoenaed. He eventually was indicted. He resigned, pled guilty, is going to jail for 46 months. And we've had a couple people on this show talk about that, both on the state legislative and county council level. As now the most senior member of the council at a whopping 5 years of service.
Now watch that senior thing.
Yeah. Well, you are a grandpa, too.
I am a grandpa as of last week.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah. Granddaughter.
Congratulations. What was your main takeaway from all of this?
Well, I guess the main takeaway is looking back at what we've put up with on the council for the last 5 years. It all starts to make sense. How Mr. Stanger was totally unengaged with anything we were doing. He was an adversary in many cases. He was a no-show pretty much at all of our meetings, with the exception of a few, because he had other plans. And those plans might have been playing video games, they might have been hitting the gym, or sitting in a local restaurant or
Did
bar.
anyone ever figure out which video games he was playing?
I have no idea.
It wasn't Rock Band, right?
I don't think so, but you might want to check with Chief Belmar on that one. So, but, he just didn't want to be county executive. He won the title. He wanted the money. He won the prestige, but he didn't want to do the work. And that is very disheartening when this region needs a leader to get us through, what we need to do.
Can I ask you, can you give us a sense of what that was like, since I guess it's probably around March was when, things started the federal authorities started to, I guess, publicly be involved. Like,
right.
how was that for those, 4 months where things were pretty unsettled?
Well, we heard rumors. Things started to come together roughly in March. We started getting stronger rumors about what was going on. Things like FBI cars parked out in front of the council building, people talking, saying, we're getting phone calls about this and things about that. So we saw it coming. We just didn't know where they were in their investigation, and when the subpoenas did hit finally and everybody in county government started scrambling to get information that they requested, and freedom of information and sunshine requests and all that going on. We didn't know if this was the beginning of the investigation, the middle, or the end. And until the indictments came down, not too much more since then, we found out this was pretty much at the end of the investigation, at least on these counts that they came up with.
Now, the council wrote a very strongly worded letter to Judge Perry asking for her to give Stanger a pretty harsh sentence, which she did. He ended up getting 46 months in prison. And after that letter was released publicly, I talked with one of your colleagues, Councilman Ernie Trachis, about some of the takeaways that he found from this entire Stanger experience. This is what he had to say to me.
People with the franchise, that is the citizens and with the right to vote, need to be engaged in and with their government. And by that I mean you certainly need to be on top of the issues and take the time to vet a candidate. Don't just simply accept advertising or mailers or party identification.
So the reason I played that clip is because my theories on why Stanger won 2 countywide elections is a lot of his ads focused on what I would consider non sequitur partisan themes. For example, when he ran for re-election in 2018, he talked about how he was going to be an adversary to Donald Trump's, quote, racist rhetoric, even though the county executive has nothing to do with national politics. And in 2014, he attacked Rick Stream's votes on guns and abortion when the county executive has nothing to do with those issues either. And in my opinion, I think that was aimed at playing at the ignorance a lot of county voters have about county government, where they think that county politicians deal with those issues because they're familiar with them, when in reality, they're not even close to that sort of thing.
Well, I think those issues that Councilman Trachis talked about and what you talked about just now were the red meat issues that we talk about in politics. Those are the things that get people out to vote. And if you can hit those red meat issues, whether it's gun control on either side of the party or either side of the spectrum, or abortion, or talking about right to work, or things like that, those are the things that get people motivated to get off the couch and come out to vote. And Stanger had a very tough primary this past go-around with Mr. Mantovani, and he had to get his base rallied up to get out and vote, because Mr. Mantovani is somewhat of a newcomer to this and is not even known very well in the Democrat Party. And so Stanger had to get his base out there to vote. And I think today those people wish probably they didn't use that vote that way.
Do you think that Republicans who may have voted for Stanger in 2014 and crossed over in the Democratic primary because they didn't like Charlie Dooley, do you think they regretted their decision too?
I think in hindsight, yes, probably so. And some of those, I think, voted for Mr. Mantovani. They gave up their primary vote and switched over when Mantovani ran against Stanger. So that might have come into play as well.
I think in fairness also, I mean, both abortion and gun rights issues are big issues right now. They not only motivate people, but there are some people out there who would probably be like, maybe he's going to have a say, rightfully or wrongfully, over whether I can bring my gun into a government building, or, that sometimes people, if that's what they really care about, they think in very granular terms. Maybe, there isn't an abortion clinic in St. Louis County, but maybe this person won't open one if they share my views against abortion or something like that. So, but I see what you're saying. Like, that is not what the county council is dealing with on a weekly basis.
and that's where education comes in. That's where people need to be engaged in their government, as Mr. Trachis said. They need to find out exactly what is the boundaries. Every government entity has boundaries. Whether you're at a municipal level, you take care of your boundaries. You're only responsible for the incorporated boundaries of that city. You can't change the world, but you can fill a pothole. And the same way is with the county government. We take care of basically the unincorporated portions of St. Louis County. there are very few things that we vote on countywide. It might be a health issue, or might be some police protection issue, or we accept a grant for job training. Those kind of things are countywide. But most of the things that we deal with really only affect the people in the unincorporated, whether it's North County or South County, and a little bit of West County in that unincorporated side of the equation. So people will come to us many times, and Jason, you've been to many of our meetings and listened to the speakers. They somehow think that the county is some kind of supreme overriding government of the region, and that we can change all the ills of the last 50 years. And we don't have that kind of jurisdiction. We'll listen, we'll talk about it, and maybe there is something we can do with our own jurisdiction. But and that came out of the Ferguson time. People wanted us to change Ferguson. Well, we don't have jurisdiction over Ferguson. Ferguson has jurisdiction over Ferguson. So the change has to happen there, and it did. We contributed in some ways, and our police were part of that, but we didn't have, and that was under Charlie Dooley's watch, we didn't have very much say over what was going on there. So people have to understand that government has limits. And we have, unfortunately, we have so many different municipalities and so many different government entities in St. Louis County that it confuses a lot of people who's responsible for this issue or not. And so people need to be better engaged with their government.
What is your initial impressions of the new council and the new county executive administration?
Well, we'll take the county executive first. Sam and I have been friends for a while, and we've gotten along. We've sponsored legislation together. We've been adversaries on certain pieces of legislation, and I think we've been fair to each other. We've been civil to each other. We probably think more alike than we do dislike on a lot of different things. So I have respect for him. I think he's a very smart person. And I hope that he can surround himself with very smart people and keep him grounded and keep him on track for the things that he might want to accomplish going forward. As we saw with the Stenger administration, if you're surrounded by unscrupulous people, you tend to fall into that trap sometimes. And I hope that Sam doesn't do that.
As far as the new council, what are your initial impressions, especially with the arrival of Kelly Dunaway and Rita Days?
Well, last night was our first meeting in a long time of having actually a full council of 7 people. And Rita Days was sworn in last night, and that completes the 7. So we're back to our normal complement of council members. It looks like Mr. Trachis will continue on as the presiding officer, and at least in the interim, and we'll see if that wants to be, if the folks on the council want that changed or not. And so it's not Republican control, so to speak, but he is a Republican and he is the presiding officer.
As listeners know, I'm pretty new, but it does seem like there are a lot of people worked up about medical marijuana and the unincorporated parts of the county, and where both the dispensaries, but also I call them manufacturing facilities. I'm not sure if that's the correct terminology, where they're going to go. I was curious about what you think the county should be doing, whether they need stricter regulations than what's been proposed or not.
Well, if you follow this issue from the vote that was taken last November on medical marijuana, the local jurisdictions have a very small amount of say over where these dispensaries or the manufacturing facilities or testing facilities can be. And that was done purposely to avoid any kind of turf war over these different types of places. So what the county Planning and Zoning has recommended, originally they recommended a distance of 500 feet between schools, churches, daycare centers, and these different locations.
I think it was only for the dispensaries, and a lot of the
Yeah,
other
it started
ones,
out with just the dispensaries, yes.
and a lot of the other ones I think were just going to be in like industrial areas, so they weren't really going to be close to those places anyways. But
Right.
but continue.
Yes, and so we've heard from constituents over this as this issue has come bubbling up to the top, and so as that has come about, people have recommended, which is what the state recommends, is 1,000 feet. And so we've gone back to our own planning and zoning and said we would like the council, the majority of the council at the time, would like 1,000 feet between all of these different locations and schools and daycare centers and so on. And that is consistent with our vaping and cigarette laws that we have on the books right now, so that there is a distance and that there is a way of keeping these properties kind of where they need to be in certain areas of the county and allowed where they need to be. So a lot of the municipalities have adopted the 1,000-foot rule, which is what the state recommends, and some have changed it. I know there's one municipality in my district that actually enacted 300 feet, and then they saw where everybody else was going with 1,000, and now they're discussing whether they should amend their ordinance and go back to 1,000.
Which city was this, by the way?
I'm not going to tell you because they're still talking about it. But they because they had a kind of a carve out situation where they were going to put a manufacturing facility in that municipality, and I think they got pushback from the folks in that area. So this is we've never been down this road before, especially with the medical marijuana. Unless you're not paying attention, you got to understand that this is a gateway for future marijuana use in the state, and everybody knows that. So we want to make sure we get this planning and zoning right, because the next, we feel the next step will be the full legalization, and then they'll have to use some of the same zoning for that as well. So we want to make sure we get this right and that we are looking out for the interest of everybody in this situation.
So you think the zoning for the medical marijuana is going to be a template when recreational marijuana is legalized? It sounds like you think that's inevitable.
I think that's a natural progression where these things go. It may not be tomorrow or next day or next month or next year, but I think that's once these licenses are awarded and these different companies come online and they get situated in different communities, they are spread out. And that is another thing that's regulated by the law, is that there only can be 24 of these per congressional district. So there are a lot of people vying for those 24 licenses in these congressional districts.
And are those 24 dispensaries or 24 of anything?
I believe it's 24 of the dispensaries. I don't know. I'll have to get back to you on that.
What are you hearing from a lot of people in your office about this? I mean, certainly we see some people testify every week, but are people calling you about this, or do you think they're not aware of what's going on?
We're getting a few calls. We're getting more emails, and we're starting to see people show up as people start to wake up to what's going on. I think they're coming to planning and zoning meetings around the area as they are figuring this out, because we have so many municipalities, so they're dealing with this issue there as well. And we're hearing from residents at that local level.
Another issue that the county council will likely deal with in the next couple months is the city-county merger question. Now, listeners may be like, wait, I thought the city-county merger discussion was dead because Better Together burst into flames when it was thrown into the dumpster fire that it was, which is not really true, because the Municipal League of St. Louis has been circulating a petition to launch what's known as the Board of Freeholders, which is this public entity that discusses and usually proposes some sort of merger or consolidation plan. And the county executive appoints 9 members to that board, and the county council has to approve those members. I asked County Executive Page what his mentality is going to be when selecting the people on that board. This is a lengthy clip, but I want to make sure that it's fully in context. This is what he had to say.
A Board of Freeholders is a sort of a constitutional convention for the region on whether or not we need to reform our governance. And that process has been triggered by a petition initiative by citizens who have said we want to try and do something different. And I think that's a testament to our community's engagement and a change opportunity. I will appoint a Board of Freeholders that looks like St. Louis County and looks like the community and recognizes the interest groups. My recommendation to the Board of Freeholders, and they'll be able to do what they want to do because they have broad authority in a constitutional convention. But my recommendation would be to take a small step forward, not ignore the disparities, not dismiss them, but recognize that progress is in a small step. In previous Board of Freeholders processes or previous regional constitutional conventions have collapsed because they tried to do too much. Better Together collapsed because it tried to do too much. And if you pack too much change in one bite, it very quickly becomes something that can't pass. And whatever this constitutional convention process, this Board of Freeholders chooses to do, has to be adopted by the voters. It has to pass St. Louis County voters, and it has to pass St. Louis County or St. Louis City voters. And if it doesn't, we have nothing. So my recommendation to them would be to take a small step forward in regional governance that allows us to continue to address the disparities and inequities and inclusion challenges that we have in our community. To do both, to take a small step in governance, but to recognize that we've got a long way to go in our disparities.
Beyond just reacting to what the county executive says, what's going to be your mindset when he makes the nominations to this board, and what questions are you going to ask to these potential nominees?
Once we don't have that list yet, and I don't think even Executive Page has that list yet, but once he gets that to us, we will start scrutinizing that. We will look at resumes. We will look at people's involvement in their community, how much they know about the areas of their community. This is a very important step in what Mr. Page wants out of this, and we want to make sure we have very engaged people that know how government is run in this region, both at the municipal level and at the county level, and that we're not going to have a lot of time for them to get up to speed. These people need to be, in my opinion, need to be people that are very engaged right now and know how municipals work, know how the county works and how the two work together. So, and then you add in the dynamic of the city, because the mayor will be able to appoint her group of folks to this same freeholders group. So there's a lot of dynamics there. We got to look at it. I hope he doesn't just give us 9. I hope he gives us 15 or 20 so that we can look through these and make sure we're getting the most engaged people on these topics.
If any of the nominees were at all connected to the Better Together proposal, would that be a non-starter for many of your colleagues? Would you just reject them outright?
I can't answer for others. In my opinion, I guess I would have to look at it on a case-by-case basis and decide how much they were involved and see if they are really the type of person we want on this Board of Freeholders.
And I think the county executive was talking about small steps, and there has been some articles about possibly the end goal of this could be having the city join the county as a municipality, which I don't think is a small step. I think that's actually a pretty big step that would require a whole lot of thought and contemplation. From a political standpoint, it would mean Republicans would never win countywide office again, even if that's the case now. This would guarantee that Democrats would win every countywide election probably for the rest of our lives. What would be your thought about that idea?
Well, I think people see that as an easy out. There is a whole nother group of problems and opportunities with that type of arrangement that no one has discussed. Who's responsible for certain functions, who's going to pay for certain functions of government, both at the city and the new county level, and how does that make the interaction between now the city, the largest municipality in the county, how does that work with places like Ballwin and Florissant and Richmond Heights and Clayton? You know, does that make them the elephant in the room, so to speak, from a political standpoint? Are they going to dictate where things go within the county because of their sheer number of the population and maybe extra representation on the county council? We don't know. And there's a lot of those discussions. The big discussion is over money. The city, as we know, is for the most part broke, and the county is not too far behind, and we're trying to make that better. And so who's going to pay for all this? Is stuff going to fall through the cracks? Are streets going to get fixed? Are policemen going to get paid on time? You know, who knows where this goes? And these are decisions. Nobody wants to talk about that. They just want to talk about, we need to come together. We need to merge our stats. We need to, have a kumbaya moment. And that's great, but there's a lot of things that have to be done. The day-to-day operations of government still have to be performed. And who's going to pay for that? And nobody seems to have a lot of those answers.
Do you think there are things that the proponents of merger are trying to fix through some change in the structure of government that could be fixed now under the current structure of government? Or are there steps people could be taking to maybe take some of the pressure off of this?
I think we need anyone in government right today needs to go back and look at their jurisdiction, whether you're a Ballwin or a Clayton or Florissant or even the city of St. Louis, and look at the model that you have. Is this sustainable? Can we do what we want to do on the tax base that we have? Can we give the services that our residents want? Maybe we're giving too many services. Maybe we need to decide, where the private sector needs to pick up on certain things. Our nonprofits. Does the government have to be everything to everybody all the time? And those are discussions that we need to get into, and that has to be done at a municipal level, a county level, and the city of St. Louis level.
We'll be right back right after this break with Councilman Mark Harder.
If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
And we're back with St. Louis County Councilman Mark Harder. Another issue that I think is going to come before the council soon is what to do with the crossings at Northwest, which is colloquially known as Northwest Plaza. For our listeners, under the Stenger administration, a whole bunch of county services, including the election board, moved into this former mall. It was controversial, I would say, at the time and after the fact, because the owners of the mall gave a lot of money to Steve Stenger's campaign committee. Most of the council voted for it except you. You actually voted against it at the time. What was the reasoning behind that before I ask you a whole bunch of questions on the issue?
Well, the big reason there was I was not believing the information that was being given to the council by the Stenger administration. The claims that they were making that we were going to save $10 million with this consolidation turned out I couldn't believe it at the time, couldn't convince my colleagues of it. It turns out we're actually in the hole. We're not even saving money there. So that claim was wrong. Other things dealing with other leases, the lease itself, the way it was figured, it was a 20-year lease. At that point in time, we never had a 20-year lease on anything in the county. I thought that was unusual. And then when the money started, we started checking MEC reports.
Missouri Ethics Commission, that's where campaign committees are.
Right, and we started checking those reports from the state and seeing where the money was coming from the developer to the tune of $360,000 over a period of time. It just didn't add up. It didn't pass the smell test, in my opinion. And so I stood out and voted no. And the other thing is that many of my colleagues at the time, some of them are no longer on the council, were getting money from the developer at that same time. So I did not. Colleen Wassinger did not. but others on the council at that time were. And so all these things added up in my mind, and when it comes down to taking a yes or a no vote, I just couldn't vote for it.
So right now, there's kind of a standoff between the Glarner brothers and the council. There's been a subpoena issued, but that subpoena has been challenged in court for them to appear before the ethics committee. And rather than talk about that, I think that the potential end game is if the council doesn't get the information that it wants, they could potentially void this lease, hypothetically. I actually posed this question to now Councilwoman Kelly Dunaway, who represents St. Anne and the actual Northwest Plaza. This was her mindset about that issue when she was running to succeed Paige on the council.
So I think the first thing we have to analyze is how that facility and how the jobs that are in that facility right now are impacting the local economic environment. I do want to take a look at how much corruption was involved in getting that contract in the first place, and I am certainly not above voiding it out. As I said before, I think it's really important that we are hitting corruption head on and undoing the damage. And if it turns out that Northwest Plaza is part of the damage that needs to be undone, I want to look very closely at that. But again, it has to be weighed with the value that it may be bringing the communities and the people who work and live near the plaza.
How serious do you think it is that the council may void the Northwest Plaza lease at this point?
Well, it's always it's always a possibility. That's another piece of this whole transaction, is that the negotiated lease had a poison pill provision, and that poison pill was we could get out of this lease if we discontinued the function of the department that was leasing the space and not just ended that. So what that would mean is that if the election board, if we disbanded the election board, did not move it anywhere else, just made that function go away, we could get out of that lease. Well, that's not going to happen. We need an election board, so that became the poison pill. And so it's all those things that were part of this lease. And the more we dug into it, and I'm on the ethics committee that handled this, and we got into it, this is after my vote, years after my vote, when we really dug into the leases and saw the triple net leases, and yes, they were touted as, we were paying $12 a square foot the first year. The second year it jumped to like $13.50, and the third year is like 15 something, because there was escalators built in, 3.9% escalators built in from year to year. So by the time we get to the 20th year, we're up to I think the top was, $22 a square foot or something for this space. Plus, we're paying all the taxes, we're paying all the maintenance, all the other things that go with renting this big of space. And I don't know if we need all the space. The election board is in a very comfortable spot over there, and if you've ever been over there, they could probably get by with less space, and maybe we either sub it out or we put some other county function in there as well. But it's they've got a lot of space over there.
So you said when you were voting on this initially, the numbers basically didn't add up to you. Can you kind of, I don't want you to go too much in the weeds, but can you kind of elaborate? Because I think probably a question that some people have is, why were you looking at this and thinking, something doesn't look quite right? Versus other people on the council?
Well, I'll tell you a quick story, Julie. When I came on the council, I was sworn in January of 15, and my associate that works with me, Chris Howard, we got invited out to the crossings to see the property. This would have been in March of that year. And so we've got the golf cart tour of the property, and it's a nice piece of property, and the developers have done a good job of bringing in new retail, new fast food, and so on to a dead mall, and they tore down a lot of buildings. So we're getting the whole tour. Well, we come around towards the back side of the building where the now current election board is, and the developer says to us, he says, well, that's where the election board is going. And we said, Oh, we didn't hear anything about that. Oh, yeah, it's all worked out. We got it worked out with Stanger. This is where it's going, and all this space, and we walked into the space, which is...
And you're like, I think I have to decide that.
Yeah, right. And what turned out is that they've been dealing with this for probably the year prior to me getting on the board, and all the council people were invited out there for their grand tour of the properties, and were told how great this is going to be. And I was the last one of the 7, because I was new on the council, to get the grand tour. And so when it came down to it, it just, everything, we start to hear that when you look back now in retrospect, and you start to look at that, and you talk about the lease, and you talk about the Stanger's campaign manager was the one that negotiated the lease, not the Public Works Department, which negotiates all of our leases. All these erratic kind of behaviors that happened during this time, everything was suspect by this time. And so there's no way I could vote yes for this. And I wish more of my colleagues would have voted no, and we wouldn't be here today, maybe.
So to take this in a different direction, I mean, the election board's at this location now. I think moving the election board to another location would be highly disruptive to the employees who have already had to move like once in the last couple of years. And you could make an argument that having a county presence in this facility stabilized what was a dead mall in an area that needs a lot of economic development. So is that going to go through your mind if the question of voiding the lease comes to the council?
I don't think that discussion is going to come to the council anytime in the near future. Right now, the Page administration is trying to renegotiate the lease where we are, and I think that's probably the best track to go on, is to try to negotiate this. But as in all negotiations, sometimes those negotiations break down, and you have to have the leverage to be able to walk away from the table when you need it. And hopefully we don't have to do that, and we hope that the developers will come to their senses and figure out that this is better if everybody stays put and we work out a new lease going forward, so that the taxpayers of St. Louis County are not on the hook for the next 15 years on this lease that's highly inflated.
So let's talk about a cheerier topic than what we've been talking about for the last 35 minutes, and that's the Powerplex.
Powerplex, yes.
Powerplex is this multifaceted sports venue that was going to be in Chesterfield. It fell through. I don't want to go into gory details about that. I already had to do a story about that in 2017. I do not want to relive. Point is, I think it's going to be in Hazelwood, and it seems like it's going to be a really positive thing for that part of the county. And I know you've been heavily involved in it. So I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about how this came to be and how it's going to benefit North County.
Thank you for that opportunity. Well, you said about Chesterfield. Yes, it started there. It fell through. They were going to go to St. Charles County, the developers of this. And I was involved at that point because when it was in Chesterfield, that's in my district, and I wanted it to be in my district. But since it fell through, I didn't want to lose it to St. Charles. And a lot of projects get lost to St. Charles, and they were offering them the free everything to get them to come that direction. And so I recommended to the developers, they said, we need this much space, and there's not a lot of that space around. And I said, have you ever thought about the Mills property up in Hazelwood? And they thought, what is the Mills property? So we got in a car, and I drove them up there, and they walked around and saw this pretty much abandoned mall, 1 million square feet under one roof, and started loving this place and started seeing what the possibilities are, because here the building is already built. They would have to build a brand new building out in St. Charles. The property's there. They brought in their architects. They brought in their financiers. Everybody started, really brainstorming this thing. And so it turned out to be a great idea from that standpoint. People started jumping on the bandwagon. And then they started having problems with the current owner and how to negotiate with them. And, this is a mall that's only 15 years old. It was built for somewhat like $260, I believe, $1 million back when, and it just went on the auction block under foreclosure for $4 million. And a new owner from New York bought it. and was not going to. He was basically going to hold and sell, and was not going to put a dime into this property. And then it turned out, as they got into their due diligence, that this property has a TIF on it that had never been paid down. So here's a 15-year TIF or longer that basically was basically back to the debt level that it was 15 years ago, which is about $35 million. So no one would touch this property with that type of debt load that had to be paid off by somebody to do anything there. Even if you're to tear it down and put up a warehouse or anything, that TIF debt would have to be paid off both to the bondholders and to the city of Hazelwood. So the developers got together, and I acted as kind of a conduit to bring people together. I have no business stake in this at all. I'm too poor. But I do understand the concept. It's a great shot in the arm for that portion of the county, and we need these type of little engines of economic development in various parts of the county, not just here. But this is an opportunity to do this, and this property, if it stays true to the projections, and they've had outside companies come in and project the business on this, we're looking at about $300 million a year of revenue off of this.
How would it get that much revenue?
Well, because it's going to be a one-stop shop for sports playing. So I know you've got a few young children. When they get to that age and you start traveling in these sports teams, whether you're baseball or soccer or any of these places, and start spending $1,000 a weekend to take your family to watch Junior play baseball somewhere, whether it's here or Indianapolis or Kansas City or Florida, you're taking all your family with you. You're eating, you're staying in hotels, you're buying gas. Johnny needs a new glove, a new bat that he forgot at home, and you start spending money. And you multiply that by the number of teams that have to show up for these tournaments. You're there from maybe Thursday night or Friday through Sunday. And you're spending money that whole time. That's where this money comes, and it's a multiplier.
So
when it comes from that,
is there any governmental subsidy from the county or from the city of Hazelwood for this? Because I think that was the sticking point in Chesterfield, from what I recall.
There's no subsidy from the county. There is we were able to secure $6 million from the CVC, the Convention and Visitors Bureau of St. Louis, because of the hotel tax that we collect on all hotel rooms in the county and the city. The county is the main driving force for that tax. That money goes into a pool every year. They pay for the obligations on the Dome and the Convention Center. They pay their staff for the CVC and other expenses, and they still come out with a surplus. So another movement on the council for the last number of years is how do we get some of this money back to be used in the county itself. Most of this money goes to the city to drive conventions in the city, and we wanted to get some of that money coming back. So the idea came back is that to help this project, they need more ball fields, because to do these tournaments, again, the multiplier effect, you need ball fields to do tournaments. We'll have ball fields on the property, but they also need ball fields off the property to accommodate these large tournaments. And so the CVC was willing to give $6 million to build ball fields for the city of Hazelwood. They will own the ball fields, the city of Hazelwood, not the developer. They then, on the weekends that the developer needs the ball fields, they will rent those back for those weekends. So Hazelwood will make a little money off of this as well to rent those facilities back to them. So no money goes directly to the developer, and we made sure of that. This money goes to help build these ball fields. Hazelwood is the most on the hook for this project because they were the most on the hook for the old mall. And so they have because of where they sit in the county and the economic development tools that they have, they're able to leverage those tools to help a project like this, which in turn will generate money to pay back what they've invested in this in a pretty quick order if they do the numbers. So Hazelwood is basically the neck of the funnel on this project. They have the most to gain, they have the most to lose, and they were losing it daily with the existing mall that they didn't know how to get rid of.
When does this facility open?
Well, it's going to close here hopefully at the end of this month. Or the first part of September. The first tournament I think they've got booked is next year, spring of next year. I believe it's a volleyball tournament. This will have this won't be just soccer. It won't be just, well, it's not going to be soccer at all, but it's going to have multi-sports. And the idea there is to keep this a year-round, week-long sports facility. So they will have baseball, they will have soccer, or baseball, softball, volleyball, basketball, cheer, and dance. They will have other recreational facilities there for the families, because when Johnny is playing baseball for an hour, what's the rest of the family doing in the off time? So there'll be restaurants, there'll be sporting goods stores, but it won't be a mall as we know a mall. It will be a sports venue and all sports themed.
Why no soccer?
Because soccer is actually taking care of in other venues in this area, and now we'll have a stadium downtown real soon, and I think soccer is pretty covered in this town at this point.
In the last minute or two, let's talk about politics real quick. Are you thinking of running for county executive next year?
I have not decided yet.
What do you think why do you think it's important for Republicans to have like a well-funded, well-organized candidate in that race? I know it seems obvious, but it didn't really happen last cycle. So I want to ask you like what the importance is this time.
I think in any race, I don't care if it's county executive or it's a prosecuting attorney or any of these partisan races in St. Louis County, they need to be well challenged and on both sides, and that way all ideas get communicated. You get people interested on both sides. If it's a one-sided or a one-party system, you tend to get bogged down in the old ideas. And unfortunately, the city of St. Louis being a one-party town, it's the same old, same old. And what you do is you lose the voters' interest. Why do I need to vote? I don't need to vote. The Democrats will run it or the Republicans will run it. When you have a challenge, when you have different challenges come together in these races, you get ideas shared. And it's the old adage about you sharpen the blade against the stone. You don't sharpen a blade against something soft or something that you can't get that abrasion. And that's where good ideas, I think, come out of the political environment. And so I encourage anyone that's interested to run, to get involved at all levels and bring your ideas to the table, because that's what our democracy needs, and that's what we need right now.
Well, thank you very much, Councilman, for coming back on our show to talk about this boring time in St. Louis County politics.
It's never boring.
It's never boring. For all of our stories, stlpublicradio.org. Follow me on Twitter at Jay Rosenbaum. Follow Julie on Twitter at
J.S. O'Donohue.
You're not on Twitter, right?
No, I try to stay away from there.
So is there any social media venue that people can get a hold of you at?
I'm on Facebook, and I also have a separate Facebook for District 7 on there to talk about my bulletin board or what's going on in the district.
Until next time, so long.